Hello and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton's Communications and Marketing Department. And today we're going to sit down for a few minutes and talk with the Interim Chief of Police, Tommy Townsend. Welcome, Chief. How are you?
I'm great, Robin. How are you today?
Great. It's good to meet you. I did not know you during your first tenure as Chief, so we're just getting to know each other, and I think the citizens would like to hear from you today.
Okay.
First question is, you have stepped in to run the police department during a time where there's a little turmoil, a little bit of negative publicity, a little bit of a storm. How is that for you?
Well, it's complicated because of the circumstances, but having a wonderful staff within the division, a wonderful staff within the city, it has made my transition back into the police division much easier than it could have been otherwise. There's many challenges that we need to deal with at this point in time to keep the division moving forward and to carry out our main mission, which is to serve and protect the citizens of Hampton.
Why did you come back? You get this phone call, I'm going to guess here because I wasn't around, from Mary Bunting, and as city manager she asked you to step back in. You've been retired, you've got a great life, you're taking it a little bit easier, spending time, I'm going to guess, with your family or hobbies. So why? Why did you say yes?
Well, one main reason, and that's because I love this organization. Having spent 30 years in the organization, and this sounds like a cliche, but it's like a second family. You spend 30 years in an organization, you help at various stages in your career to build it to what it has become. If there's a need, I'd always said when I retired, if I was ever needed to assist in anything in the city, that I'd be willing to do that. And I got the call to consider coming back during this transition period, and I readily accepted it because I care so much about the organization.
Now, you are from Hampton, right?
Correct.
So it's not just the organization, it is the city. You've lived here pretty much all your life.
Yes, I grew up here. I attended Hampton City Schools, graduated from Hampton High School. All of my immediate family and my wife's immediate family grew up in Hampton, our siblings. So I'm very attached to the city. I have many friends here. And it's coming back and offering my assistance in any way that I can assist is very important to me.
You know, you're not the only one. I think back, and even in the short time I've been with the city, people retire and then they get sort of pulled back in. You know, Joe Spencer went back to his business and there was a call for an interim council member, and he heeded the call and served, and I've seen a lot of other people retire and come back. You know, Chris Sneed ran for council, or people come back on boards and commissions. I'm not there yet, but I assume that once you've lived this life as a public servant, it's a little hard to step away all the way.
Well, you never detach yourself from it. Totally. I mean, when you've invested as many years into public service as I had, you just never detach yourself from it permanently. And there's things during my retirement, I was called to serve 2 different times as interim chief or an interim superintendent. I got called to consider serving as the interim superintendent of the Western Tidewater Regional Jail that's located in Suffolk and serves 3 jurisdictions over there. And I accepted that back in 2006 is when I began there, and it was supposed to be a 6-month tour as an interim jail superintendent, and that turned out to be 22 months altogether.
Oh my gosh.
That was a tremendous learning experience, and but you know, thinking after having been the chief of a police department that being a jail superintendent is very similar. You have personnel issues, training issues, budgetary issues, and so forth. But there were a lot of other challenges with housing, sometimes up to 900 inmates. That was a real learning experience for me.
Well, that's also the jail that serves medically difficult. I mean, that's a complex population.
Well, it is. It is. Over there in that jail, we had local and state inmates. We had inmates that were awaiting their adjudication of their case. We had inmates that had been convicted and were awaiting transfer to the Department of Corrections. And we had inmates that were federal inmates that we housed under contract for the U.S. Marshals. So it was a very, very complex, challenging, but yet very satisfying tour of duty I did over there.
So tell us about why you wanted to be an officer in the first place. How did you get into this business?
Well, actually, after I graduated from high school, I went to college for about a year and a half. Like many young people going right out of high school into college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do in life. Just kind of went to school because that's what was kind of expected. The Vietnam War was still going hot and heavy at that time. The draft lottery came into effect. I felt that because of my lottery number, there was a good chance I was going to get drafted into the military. My family has a tradition of service in the U.S. Navy. My father had served in the U.S. Navy during World War II, and my older brother had served in the Navy. And so I felt that if I went into the military service, I wanted to join the Navy. So I did that. I went ahead and dropped out of school, joined the Navy. Went to a ship that was home ported in Long Beach, California after I had done my training, and did 2 tours to the Western Pacific, commonly called Westpac, which is where the Vietnam theater was. So after that, I met some friends while I was in the Navy who were interested in law enforcement and talked to them a lot about it. And then I had another friend who I'd gone to high school with who went straight through college, and after graduating took a job with a police department in Northern Virginia. And speaking with him and visiting him in Northern Virginia, I just caught the bug, and I couldn't believe that they'd actually pay you to do the job. I would have done it for free at that point in time.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I just fell in love with it.
So you came in and went up all the way through the ranks to the position of chief?
Yeah, I was hired as a patrol officer in January of 1974, completed the police academy, went through the training that was available at the time, and actually began, at that time we had a walking beat in downtown Hampton and a walking beat in Phoebus. Began walking the beat like every other new officer did at the time, and eventually worked my way up through the ranks and served my last 4 years as chief of police.
Being a chief, I would think, is so much different than the patrol officer. I mean, you are on the streets doing the job that you came here for, and then by the end you are an administrator, a budget guru. I mean, it's very different skills. It's
a different set of skills that you acquire as you evolve through the organization and learn. You educate yourself, obviously through formal education, to qualify yourself to become a chief of police. And so it's a combination of academic learning, real practical law enforcement training, and then experience that all has to come together. But at heart, you're always still a police officer. You still wear a badge. You still view yourself as a police officer, but you have the added responsibility of not just serving the citizens who ultimately are my boss, the citizens of Hampton, ultimately, but also being concerned about all the members, the officers and the civilian members of the police division. So it's a big responsibility and one that you pretty much live with 24 hours a day.
It's not a job that you work your 8 hours and go home, or your 10 hours, as the case may be sometimes in the city.
No, you don't. It's an all-inclusive job that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Was there a particular task or time that was your favorite when you were on the street, or when you were working as a police officer, or as being a chief? Kind of the most fun? And I'm talking about fun here, like personally satisfying.
Well, I was fortunate in my career. I spent about 3 to 4 years in each assignment, coupled with promotions. And it's kind of a slow process at first. I think it took me 10 years to get promoted to sergeant. So, that was a third of my career. And then to progress through the other ranks, once you get up higher in ranks, the promotions seem to become quicker because there's less competition actually, because
Right.
there's fewer people competing for the position. But if I had to go back and look at all the assignments I had, I enjoyed all of them, but probably the one that I really enjoyed the most was actually when I was a detective and investigating criminal cases. That was very satisfying.
What made that so satisfying?
Because you could see in some cases that your efforts to investigate certainly help the victim get justice. As a patrol officer, you have that opportunity as well, but not as much as when you're a detective and you take a case and follow all the way through and identify suspects, bring the case forward for prosecution, working with the prosecutor and have a successful prosecution. And at least there's the satisfaction of getting justice for the victim. So you can sort of see a conclusion to that process. So much in law enforcement is a revolving door type thing. We unfortunately arrest the same individuals over and over for repeated crimes. Sometimes they go to jail if they're convicted and sentenced. Sometimes they don't. So it can be a revolving door type thing in terms of personal satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
There just seemed to be more of a conclusion to criminal investigations from a detective standpoint than from some of the other assignments that I had back then.
The result of your work, the more you put into it, and probably the relationship with the victim or the prosecutors. I mean, it's a much longer process.
It is.
You're more invested. They're more invested.
It is, and of course you have to look back. That was 20 some years ago, and the process has changed now. Today, patrol officers have much more opportunity to work cases, follow through on them more so than what we did when I was a patrol officer. When I was a patrol officer back in those days, you pretty much took a preliminary report, turned it over to the investigators, and that was pretty much it unless you were subpoenaed to go to court. Now, the officers, because we've changed procedures, given enhanced training to the officers in both criminal and traffic investigations, they're able to follow through, have the opportunity to follow through on many more cases than they did when I was a patrol officer.
Well, that's interesting. Are there other changes in law enforcement or trends that you've seen in your career?
Oh goodness, yes. I mean, everything. Technology is probably the most obvious one. The ability to get information almost at your fingertips compared to when I was a patrol officer. When I was a patrol officer, when you were out of the car, you were out of communication. We didn't even have handheld radios. So when you marked out a service on a traffic stop or on a call, you would have to get back to the car to communicate, and that sometimes could be challenging.
Right.
So,
and so now you guys have like laptops in their cars or some sort of
they have
computer.
mobile data terminals and most of the police units that allow officers to get information, to transmit information, to do their reports in a digital way that saves time and is a much better way to manage information, and we manage a lot of information. I mean, it's just unbelievable the amount of information that comes into the police department through criminal reports, traffic reports. Everything that we deal with generates lots of information.
Right. So would you do it again? Would you go back into law enforcement if you were,
Oh, absolutely. I've had my career has given me opportunities to do things that I would have never dreamed of. Before I retired and I was a chief of police, I actually had the opportunity to go with a group of FBI agents to Budapest, Hungary, to do a 1-week training session at the International Law Enforcement Academy located in Budapest. That academy was run by the FBI and the State Department, ironically in a former Soviet satellite country.
Wow.
And it was just ironic that the FBI and the U.S. State Department would have a law enforcement training facility there. And it was called the International Law Enforcement Academy, or the ILEA. And it was a state-of-the-art training facility contained in an old convent-looking structure. It was beautiful. But the purpose of it was to give American law enforcement training to police officials from former Soviet satellite countries. Of course, this was after the advent of the decline or the demise of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War.
Because when you're in a police state and when you're in more of a democracy, the police they behave differently towards citizens.
Absolutely.
I mean, that had to be a huge shock.
It was, and it was different. The group of folks that we were given instruction to were from Armenia. They were chiefs of police, deputy chiefs of police, and prosecutors. And it was very, very interesting. Again, I was there for a week. And that was just an experience that I don't think I would have ever been afforded had I not taken this career.
That's great. Well, we're glad you took this career, and frankly, we're glad you took the call from Mary Bunting and stepped back in. I know I've heard from people in the community and from people in the police division who respect you and are glad to have your steady hand at the helm right now.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to do everything I can to live up to everyone's expectations.
Well, thank you. And I hope, we don't keep you for 22 months, but if we do, I'm glad you're here.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Thank you so much.
Chief. Thanks for coming by today.
Sure.
And thank you for watching this episode of Round Robin.